Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I am Clementine, and as always, I am Super Saiyan! But never mind that. In this video, we're gonna do the final sanding, shaping, corner rounding, and finishing of this offset guitar body built from a 1940s antique oak farm table. I will show and explain the entire process in detail, as well as talk about some alternate methods and techniques that could have been used to achieve the results that you desire. And since this is part of the Rule Breaker / Mythbuster guitar build series, we'll see what rules we can break and myths we can dispel. If this sounds like something you might be interested in, stay tuned! Bean footage, roll that. Okay, so real quick before we start the video, I'll put a little card up in the corner or a link or something for the other videos in this series. It shows how we got here, like pickups built from a scrap 2x4, making the neck, doing the body, and all of that smooth jazz. So the first thing I did was to take some 60 grit, start smoothing down the sides, and then working on the corners to get it rounded off. I'm trying to create kind of a fake binding look. That dark color on the top is actually the original finish from this oak table that the guitar is actually sitting on right now. Here you can get a good view of that fake binding thing that I was talking about. You see that light color, it's going all the way around. Now before, when I was sanding this thing on the belt sander to get the final body shape, I couldn't get into this little top corner here. So I straightened it up with the Japanese saw rasp. And here's you a myth alert. You need to have those expensive shaping tools from StewMac or whatever. I'm getting into here and cleaning this up with a chainsaw file. Next, I wrapped the 60 grit sandpaper around the chainsaw file to make kind of a round rasping tool. And I got in there and got a good radius on that. And then I unfolded it a little bit and used it to get that bevel on the edge. And you can see that worked out pretty good. Now the next thing to get at would be this neck access cutaway. The sanding drum that I used left a little lip on here, but 60 grit's pretty rough, knocked it down quick. Then I went ahead and chamfered the edges on those pickup cavities and the neck pocket for just a little extra finished look. Flip her over to the back and work in that belly carve. This one is a little different than the front because there's not the color difference, so I'm just trying to blend it in completely, make a nice smooth transition. Then I go ahead and start beveling these edges just like I did on the front. And when I get to here, you can see that there's a little bandsaw mark still left on the inside of the cutaway. Now if you wanted like a nice clean finished out look, something slick as glass, you would obviously want to sand that away, but this being rustic kind of guitar, I just gloss over it, keep going. Pretty much what I did this whole thing, and I love this style of guitar for that. It's okay to leave imperfections and spots, it just give it character. Then I just basically lightly scuffed over the back with the 60, and I'm using very light pressure. I'm not gouging or scratching at it, just hitting anything off that might be sticking up, and then I flip it over. Do the same thing on the front, and this is mostly on the front to remove those marks that I used for building it, my pencil marks and whatnot. I'm not trying to take the finish down or get rid of any of these scratches or anything. I actually want those. And after that, I did the entire process again with 120 and then a 320, and then I cleaned it up with a little mineral spirits and a Scotch-Brite just to get it nice and clean. And this is what we have. It's about that time I was like, hold up, I still got a screw hole in the back. So I take some Type Bond 2, dip a bamboo skewer in it, hammer it down in there, and then cut it off with a chisel. Now my attention goes to this wormhole that I'd opened up by doing the body carve that was in the original wood when they actually put the tongue and groove together. So I take some sawdust that came out of the box that was under the bandsaw when I cut this guitar out, pack it in the hole, wet it with some super glue. I did the same thing around the bamboo skewer. After those dried, I hit them with a little 120, then went over it quickly with a 320 block, and it's good to go. And this got me thinking another good thing to do right now would be to go ahead and drill the tunnels for my pickup wires. So I ran them from the neck pocket into the P90 cavity. Luckily that went well, and the next thing I did was go from the P90 cavity to the control cavity. Now the only thing that I need is a hole for the output jack. Now since I was was gonna do this with a Forstner bit. I figured I'd drill a pilot hole to follow with the spade in the middle of the Forstner bit. This was a bad idea. It made the thing chatter and jump around everywhere, but eventually I got it worked through there, got my hole done. So I went ahead and sanded around those and blew the guitar out and cleaned it all up again, and now we're ready to talk about some finish options. So like I said before, I'm going for a rustic kind of look, so I want all this grain texture and these scratches and things to stay, but I want a semi-gloss kind of shine on there like a hand-rubbed oil thing. But if you want this to be slick as glass, you're gonna need to use something like this commercial grain filler. But you can also make your own grain filler by thinning out sheetrock joint compound with something like a stain or a black paint to show the grain, or hell, you can even use colors to have colored grain. When I did my Burl Telecaster kit, I did this with plastic wood. You just skim coat it, sand it back off. And grain filling's pretty much a must if you want a spray-on finish that is gonna come out slick and shiny. But on this, I used this offcut from making the body to try out several different things. I tried this dark Danish oil, and it gave a kind of a cheap look on the open grain side. I did not like that, just kind of too dark. I tried some thinned poly shades, classic oak. I don't recommend this stuff, it kind of sucks. I got this for free. Now I love what it did on the flat pre-finished side, but on the open side grain, you see here again, it's kind of got that muddy, cheap look to it. I don't like that either. So what I ended up going with was this Minwax Fast Dry Polyurethane Clear Gloss, but it's not just pure, it is thinned out with mineral spirits to make it wipeable, and it also has a little bit of boiled linseed oil to help it wipe and cure correctly, and also just a little bit of that Watco Danish oil for a tiny tint of color. I don't know exactly what the ratios are or the measurements. I just made it up until it did what I wanted it to do. You'll have to figure out your own mix to achieve what you want. And you can see on this flat part, it did almost exactly the same as that thinned poly shades, but on the side grain here, it's got a nice clear honey golden color. I can rock with that. See me shaking that polyurethane? That was really stupid. We put bubbles in it and I had to wait a long time before I could use it. Don't do that. I was trying to prove that it was thin, like you can even hear it. And real quick before we finish, another way that you can make a super slick finish, and this is without using grain filler, and it works even better if you have used grain filler. You could take your store-bought or DIY wipe-on poly mix or oil finish and apply it with a high-grain sandpaper, like a 600 or a 1000, and pour it on there and just scrub it on. It'll do what the old folks used to call making gravy. It'll make the sanding dust, and it'll be inside of the finish, and it will make its own grain filler. My grandfather used to call it angel dust, and as time went on, you can see why that become not a cool thing to call it anymore. Well, here's our body. We're ready to apply finish. This has been cleaned thoroughly and put on a new cloth so there's no dust around. I'm gonna fold up a piece of t-shirt material, and I'll just simply start wiping on our polyurethane mix. And here's you another myth alert. Minwax polyurethane is cheap junk. It's no good for guitars. You'll see, man. That pretty Telecaster, that was fast dry clear polyurethane sprayed through a gun, thinned out with mineral spirits. If it's good enough for high-end furniture, it'll work for guitars. Now you see I put a thin, even coat on there, and I'm gonna let this sit for about 3 to 5 minutes. That'll let it soak in and thicken up just a little bit, and now I'm using another clean piece of t-shirt to wipe it back off. And you can see pretty much all that's left is what got soaked in. And then we're gonna let this dry. And the first coat really won't take very long to dry. Okay, so with regular polyurethane, you're gonna sand in between coats, but with this wipe-on poly and the fact that I've wiped it back off, it's way too thin to sand. If I sand between every coat, I would just be going nowhere. So I'm gonna take this coffee filter and I'm gonna burnish it. I'm gonna really rub it, get it hot, and it will turn very dull. That'll give me a good buffed up surface for the next coat. So I'm gonna wipe on another layer of poly, I'm gonna let it tack up, wipe it back off again, rinse and repeat, but I guess tack up's not a good way to put it. You don't want it to get sticky, and when you're using the other t-shirt to wipe it off, you need to keep rolling it around and folding it it so that you got a clean piece on every swipe so that you are not letting it get sticky and saturated and starting to drag fuzz bunnies into your finish. If you have let it sit until it's gotten sticky, I would say apply a wet poly again and then wipe it off. But I ended up doing this 6 times. And this is the kind of finish that I got after 6 coats. And as you let it dry, like overnight or for a couple of days, it'll actually start just looking better and better. Now that I've put the guitar up and let the back dry for 24 hours so I can handle it, I have the guitar up on its side and I'm gonna start applying to one side. And something good happens here to learn from. You'll see I'm new to it today and I'm not in the groove and I put it on way too thick and you'll see some run down the side. Well, that's not a problem. You just wipe it off. It won't negatively affect that other finish in any way. After I did 6 coats on that side, the same way as I did the back, I was able to let that dry and then flip it on the other side, do it, and this is what that turned out like. And we're ready to do the front. Now, what you're gonna see here with the front's just about exactly what you saw on the back, except for I know it's gonna suck it in a lot now, and this front is a lot flatter than the back and a lot more finished out because this was a tabletop. So I'm really putting it on thick. You can see that grain has just come alive. And once again, after a few minutes, I'm wiping it back off and I end up burnishing it, putting another coat on, taking it off. Everything's going fine. I get to coat 4. Well, not the wrapper, coat number 4, and she was looking sweet. But then the neighbor decided to start mowing the ditch right outside the house, and all kinds of dandelion things came and stuck to the guitar. So I had to wet it up super wet and then scrub back off as much as I could and basically do the last 3 or 4 coats again. I didn't let it dishearten me though. That's why I gotta get the garage done as soon as the wood process go back down. But I had run out of t-shirt material and I had to use a different one. You will use a whole lot of t-shirt rags to do this. Keep a whole stack of them. But you know, everything turned out really good. And that's when I took these pictures when it had been drying about maybe an hour. It got pretty darn slick. And now that it's been sitting inside drying for like 2 or 3 days, it looks really good. It got much slicker, much shinier, and it darkened up a bit. I did somehow end up with a run or 2 on the bottom side. I don't understand that because I know I was watching for them and wiping them, but it happened somehow. It doesn't really much matter. I'm going to wait until this thing cures, and then I'm going to cut and buff it, and then it should really be something. Well guys, that just about does it for this video. If you found this educational or entertaining in any way, please like and maybe subscribe. I am Clementine. You have been watching Heavy Metal ATC. Till next time.